Hi, this is JoAnna Brandi, and welcome to Living on the Growing Edge. It's a crazy, changing, evolving, and expanding world. So, staying ahead today means more than just keeping up, it means exploring the frontiers of thought, innovation, ideation. In this long form video series, I bring you face to face with visionaries, disruptors, thinkers who are shaping tomorrow's workplaces and worlds by living out on the growing edge. They're reframing, reimagining, and re envisioning. And as I learned from my first guest, reinventing. So I'm happy you're here. Enjoy the series. You can always leave comments below and be sure to subscribe while you're here. Well, hello there. This is JoAnna Brandi, and I am here today with Matthew George, known as Matt, right? We talked to you about your Matt George.
Yeah.
And we're going to have an incredible conversation. Let me take a look at my notes here so I can give you a somewhat accurate idea of who this gentleman is. He's got a 2-page resume that blew my socks off, and he's here for a very specific reason. We're going to be talking about the growing edge of culture. This is the Growing Edge program where we talk to the people and with the people that are at that edge of knowing what's going to come next. So I'm really honored that you said yes.
I love it.
Harvard Business School executive leadership coach. He's a 3 times #1 best-selling author. He's a consultant. He's a TV host. He's a speaker. Oh, and he's got 5 children. So I don't know where he had time to do all that.
That's the fun part. That's the fun part.
So Matt's been a leader in the nonprofit space for over 30 years. And he told me something the other day that just blew my mind. The first job he ever held was CEO. So talk about throwing yourself into the fire, I'll tell you. He's got some Shark Tank connections, which I found pretty cool. And I met Matt through a gentleman I've known for over 40 years, David Breyer, who is undoubtedly the best brand guy out there. His books are fabulous. His workshops are amazing, and his ideas are incredible. This is the growing edge guy, and he'll be on the show soon too, I hope. And so that's kind of a lot of fun. So I think that one thing I read about you that we had a lot of phone conversations, is that every day you want the opportunity to change lives.
That's right.
Let's start out with that. Let's talk a little bit about your career, and then we'll just see where we go from there. I'm interested in what you're teaching people at Harvard about culture.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you having me on the show, JoAnna. I'm excited. I love doing this. And your expertise is needed right now. Talking about happiness in the workplace, talking about culture, talking about, those all relate to one big important word, and that's employment, right? It's keeping people.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's keeping people working, and all business needs people. No matter what's going on with AI, you still need people.
Hopefully.
So I appreciate you having me on.
My pleasure.
So, I started being a fundraiser at age 16. It was a story. It took me a while. It took me years to tell the story. I was 16, and one day I was sitting in class. I was in high school, and I had a friend of mine, and he was sitting next to me, and he was battling cancer. And the next day he was gone. And I had never really personally experienced, my grandpa died when I was 9, and that was awful. But I never had a friend pass away, and he was so young. And so, his parents were great people, as a great family. But, I grew up in a town where there just wasn't a lot of money. And so here you've got parents that not only lose a child, but they're battling those bills, and they're battling the loss of a child, and now you have to spend money on a funeral. It just didn't add up to me. Like it was the first time it really kind of slapped me across the face that something was off in our system.
Wow.
And so I was a tennis player. I played through college. And in high school, I said, you know what? I'm going to do a tennis marathon, and I'm going to do this to raise money for this family. I ended up, the short of it is, I raised $3,500 at age 16. And when I gave this check to them, this was back in 1986. And when I gave them the $3,500, it felt like a million. And I saw their face, and when I felt what I felt, I little did I know this was going to be the path that I was going to be on the rest of my life, because that was actually the first day where I felt like I could change lives and save lives, which goes to your question. That's how it started.
What's the feeling? Because when I start a program, I do a lot of work with executives. I work with Vistage. And one of the first things I show them is I do a little exercise with them, but then I say, look, I lied about why I'm really here. So let me tell you right off the bat, I'm here to talk to you about the F word. And they, oh, do that. Because the F word in business is feelings.
Yeah.
Because we don't ever just have a meeting where we sit around and talk about feelings. So what was the feeling that
Well,
you,
the feeling was of I actually could fill a void, made someone feel good for that moment.
oh,
And I couldn't I couldn't describe it at the time. I was a kid, I was but it really led to a fast tracking of raising a heck of a lot of money over even through college. I mean, so
wow,
I give them the check. They obviously were crying. I was crying. It felt like a million. And one day, a year later, I was looking at going to school. I went to school and went to a junior college in Champaign, Illinois, and then went to the University of Illinois. And I was driving from my hometown to Champaign, Illinois, and there's a story about two kids with leukemia, and it was a 30-minute story. And I don't know what made me listen to it, but I pulled over and I was crying, and I couldn't believe that these kids, and probably brought up a lot of what happened when I was 16, but um, I said, you know what? I'm going to track these kids down. And I did. And I ended up doing a huge fundraiser that raised well over $100,000 at age 18. And
tennis event? Did you do it with tennis?
I did another tennis marathon.
Wow.
I raised at that event. I raised 35,000. Her name was Stephanie. She was a cute kid, and she actually beat leukemia. Uh, I was battling dehydration, and I was tired, and I was doing I dislocated a hip. I tore muscles in my arms, and
Gosh.
my mom was a nurse, and she was what happened, the world, I set a world record. I don't typically talk about this, but what the world record for playing tennis is 125 hours, and I ended up playing 126. And what happened was I battled through 5.5 days of accumulating 10 minutes every hour. I could accumulate that time for rest. And I played about 24 to 26 straight hours. And then I slept for an hour. And then I was monitored. I had sponsors. It was the first time I saw the power of sports to the extreme. I had calls from Hulk Hogan and Rick D's Top 40 and all these different celebrities calling me, and I was on the radio with them. And as I was playing, and we ended up raising there over $35,000. And what happened with that was I was coming towards the end, and I was really struggling. I was hallucinating, and
Oh,
um,
Lord.
what my the doctor and my mom said, that probably my mom's a nurse. Probably be a good idea if you're going to stop now. And I look over, and there's Stephanie. And here you got a 10-year-old girl who has no hair. She is battling leukemia. This was back in the early 90s, and this was in 90 actually. And you know, the death rate was very high. Uh,
I remember back then, leukemia was pretty much well, we lost a friend when I was young. It was practically a death sentence back then.
96% at that time. And I said to myself, you know, I'm getting chills just telling the story.
I'm about to burst into tears. So,
I'm thinking about her. That's why, not of what I did. I'm thinking about her because I remember it so vividly. As she sat there over to the side, and I said, if I can sit here and beat myself up, I'll heal. She may not heal. And I ended up breaking the record. And what happened after that was my all-time favorite idol in sports was Walter Payton with the Chicago Bears, and he's considered the best running back of all time, and he won the Super Bowl in '85 and all of this stuff, and his posters were in my room, and he had a foundation in Chicago, and I called him, and back then we didn't have cell phones, and so I kept calling and leaving messages, and about 14 messages I left. And I get a call one day, and Walter Payton says, "Hey, is Matt George there?" And I said, "This is him." He goes, "You're one persistent SO, you know what?" And
oh my gosh.
the next day, I'm up in his office. I convinced him to come to Champaign. We raised $100,000 for cancer and leukemia. And that was the start of now over 250 events and fundraisers in my life.
And you were how old again?
20.
20. Just amazing. It's
So that's how I got
clear.
into business.
It's pretty clear what you were put on this earth for.
You know what? I feel that.
Must.
I felt that even back then. Like I had a duty. I knew that this business you didn't make a lot of money. And but I dedicated, and there's not just me. I mean, I speak on behalf of all people in social service agencies and people that who I call are true heroes that I just happen to have a title, but everybody else, those frontline people, they are what gets me going because they do the work, they do God's work. And without them, we would be in a much worse situation than we already are in the United States.
Amazing. That's just amazing.
Yeah.
What I've noticed in my career, because I work in the for-profit sector as well as the nonprofit sector, when I'm working in the nonprofit sector, I'm not trying to engage people. In fact, I'm trying to teach them how to disengage when they go home because they pour their hearts and souls into it and very often don't take care of themselves. In the
Yeah.
other sector, I've had people that feel no purpose, they're disengaged, they don't know how to connect with the purpose of the company, if the company has a purpose other than making money.
Well, I have a speech that I give about this actually. What I say is in the for profit, and we need for profit, obviously.
Of
But
course we do.
in the for profit business, if you're selling cheeseburgers or tennis shoes or cars, whatever it is, and you don't hit your quota for the day, you go home, you can have dinner, whatever, and then you wake up the next day and you know what you have to sell. In the business that I'm in, it was death. It was, I saw kids that
Yeah.
were shot, stabbed, sexually abused, physically abused, mentally abused, low IQ, uh, autism. I mean, I saw everything that you could see. And what it does is, I don't think for me personally, people ask me all the time, like they'll say, how did you see what you saw on a daily basis and go home to your kids? And I'd say, you know, when people say you can separate your job, I never agreed with that. Like if you could, then I didn't think you were human. Like I would sit there. I knew what I had to do was I had to handle internal home life and my wife and kids, and then handle the crisis in a way to where my kids and wife didn't know what was going on. Like I didn't want them to know we had a kid on run and she was missing. I didn't want, and I'd leave at 2 o'clock in the morning and actually get in my car and go hunt. I'd look for these kids. Like I don't go in and talk to my kids about trafficking and this all this stuff that's going on. So my kids always wondered what I did. They just thought since I was um, always out and about and I knew people, in a small town, I ran a very large agency. So I would sit here and in that agency, people know you, you're visible. So my kids always thought that was funny, and they really never realized till they got older they what I did. And so I would take them, I ran the children's home here in Peoria, Illinois for years, and we had 1,700 kids a month flow through our agency. I had
Oh,
500
no
employees. Yeah.
way. Really?
Yeah, so we had crisis every 5 minutes, and so it's crisis management is probably. Someone just asked me this a couple of days ago. They said, "What do you think you're really really good at?" And I thought, people think fundraising, and I'd argue a better storyteller than a fundraiser, which equals money. But I would say crisis management may be one of the things I have in my back pocket that most people probably don't.
Wow. Wow. And in a position like yours, or anyone who's dealing with crisis management, do you is there an after effect of that, though, that since you deal with so much crisis all day long, you have a hard time with minor crises in the other part of your life?
Oh man, that's a strong question.
Well,
I
from my
I
perspective, if you're doing that all day long and you come home and one of your kids says, Johnny stole my truck, or, I get yelled at school today, or any of that kind of
yeah,
stuff,
that's
how do
good.
how do you manage it so that the thing that happened to your child is just as important?
Yeah, I didn't manage it well when I was younger. I'd say age helped.
Age
Um,
is everything. Yeah.
yeah, I would say I got wiser. I understood what my role was. I actually pinpointed it, and it actually happened during one of my groups at Harvard. I was sitting there at Harvard Business School, and it just hit me one day a few years ago when I was just thinking to myself, you know what? I became a good CEO at about age 38. And I'm not saying I was a bad CEO, but I was at the top of my game at age 40. And when I, and that meant I could handle mentally probably 90% of the situations. And in our business, it's funny. I had a board member one time. I didn't get in an argument with him, but I really, this was during COVID. I said, you really don't understand what we do. Like, I don't think you understand that during COVID, we didn't shut down. We had all these kids that were getting sick and staff team members getting sick. And so I tracked just in HR how many decisions that me or my team, but mainly me, that we were part of in 1 month, and it was 740. And so those decisions
Oh,
multiplied over a career, you sit there and you're like, that's just in a month. And then there's level tens. I'd always tell my team, I go, there's levels 1 through 10. 10 is death. Anything else is fixable.
wow.
10 is death. So don't come to me freaking out at a 6.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
we're
Wow.
in we're in the business to manage a 6. We're in the business to manage a 9, but we're not we can't be freaking out at a level 3 or 4 because wait 5 minutes.
So how do you hire the right people? Because I know it's not easy getting people into the nonprofit sector because it's not exactly known for high paying jobs. How do you hire people who are empathic? Because, of course, you kind of have to be in order to work there, but can handle a 9 or 7 or 6.
Yeah, it takes to me it takes great leadership, and it you have to set the tone. This is a culture question in my opinion. Like I would
Good. Keep talking then.
people I would so my head of human resources used to get mad at me. And the reason why she'd get mad at me was because every 2 weeks we would have a uh, new employee orientation. So, when you have 500 employees, you've got employees coming in and out all year.
Mhm.
And turnover's high in this sector, period. And I would start off, I'd be the first one. And she said, why do you always want to go first? I said, it's pretty simple. Number one, if they know I'm on the agenda and they're late, we already know what kind of employee they
True, true.
are. Number two, uh, I can get a feel of who really wants to be here and who is willing to be hooked. And here's what I mean by that.
Hmm.
In our business, it may take a day, it may take 6 months, but once you're hooked, you don't leave. And what that is that goes to the change lives and save lives. Now, for me, I was hooked at age 16, but not everybody gets an experience like that. Not everybody was able to do certain things. We have people that um, grew up in every aspect of life. Like we all know getting into this business that poverty is not going away. You have to manage it. Poverty is there's zero chance of poverty going away.
Right, right.
So you have to manage it. I want to know if those people are all in, and if they're not, don't waste my time. Because what's going to happen is, and I would say this, I would say, I ask that you're here for the kids, you're here for the families, you're here for the communities, and then you're here for each other. If you're not on any one of those four, go work at the mall because you're going to waste our time, and these kids are relying on you.
Hmm.
So it's different than a for profit. Now, the business internally, I wrote a book on the business is the same,
Hmm.
you know, but the feelings aren't. And so that's what I would say. And I would be spot on. In all those years, I had two people walk out. And
Oh my God.
I actually wrote them a letter and thanked them. And I said, it's probably the best thing for you. I appreciate you having the guts to be able to get up and know
Wow.
that this isn't right.
Two people
Two
in all
people.
of you.
Now, I'm not saying we had other people that failed, but
Oh,
I had two people recognize right off the bat that this job wasn't for them.
okay. So in your opinion, is that kind of a job a calling?
Yeah, yeah. I think you're wired to make change. I think you're wired to help people. It's no different than my mom was a nurse. My mom retired and she's 78 now, and she still takes care of people. Everywhere we go, she's just talking and making sure everybody's okay. And I think those type of people are the people that get into this business. The people that are in it to, for I don't know, for money, you're not going to make great money. But I will tell you this, I never made great money, but I will say my life is fulfilled.
Yeah, yeah.
My
One
heart, my heart knows what is good and bad in our society more than probably the average person.
interesting. Well, you've got a broader perspective.
Yes.
The average person doesn't spend time looking at those things that are uncomfortable to look at.
Yeah. SEAL Team 6 says we are comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, I think also uh, at the growing edge, at that place, you have to be uncomfortable. You
Yes.
there's because you're in the unknown. You don't know what's going to come next. When in my case, when I quit my job and took off to because I just couldn't be there anymore.
Right.
It was a great place to work. The people were wonderful. The money was amazing, but I just, when it got to the point where I could not be there because certain aspects of the culture had turned toxic, I just couldn't be there.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, what happens to people. And I think what's one of the things that's happening right now that businesses, profit or nonprofit, have to address is that need for people to feel like they belong, to feel like they're making a difference, to feel like they've got some sort of a purpose. My observation has been we don't have church, people don't go to church anymore. So we don't have church, Sunday school, choir. We don't have a lot of the social systems that were set up to give people that feeling of connection and meaning. And work becomes the next sort of logical place where that could happen,
Hmm.
could happen.
Well
Uh,
said.
and because I'm so steeped in the positive psychology part of it, I'm a bit of a nerd. Uh, I know that when you create that at work, you're creating the conditions for health. You're making sure that people are feeling more of the good emotions, the good chemicals. Their immune systems are being built daily
Right.
because kindness and things like that produces serotonin. And so I'm having a hard time understanding why more businesses aren't jumping on that. It's not a bandwagon, aren't jumping on the science of how can we make people feel better? How can we create an environment where people want to come to work? How can we create this kind of environment? Because it's a powerhouse competitively.
Yeah. I have an answer to that, actually.
Good.
I know that's a shock. Uh,
It's not
but
a shock to me.
no, I'm just
You're one
joking.
smart guy. I figured you might have a few answers for me.
Well, I was talking to a high up Fortune 100 company employee, as a
Okay.
C-suite employee.
Okay.
And they said to me, and their quote has stuck with me for the past 5 years.
Ooh.
And what they said was that we used to bleed mission and now we bleed green, meaning they lost their feel and all they care about is shareholders and money.
That's it.
And that discussion really hit me in my gut. I've thought about it a lot. I've read so much that you can read about culture and companies, and have access to it at Harvard Business School. And you sit there and you're like, to me, that doesn't make sense. Because if you think about it, it makes sense for the investors, but it doesn't make sense for the employees. And the employees are who still run the company. They still sell the products, make the products. They still run internal business. Every one of these Fortune 500 companies have foundations and they have marketing and you name it. And those employees are disengaged.
No kidding.
And that should not happen.
Right.
And so to me, that falls onto the CEO. And
Yep.
then the second person it falls onto is uh, the CHRO. The chief human resource officer has to put systems in place, because the CEO's number one job, no matter what anybody thinks, it's really culture.
Yeah. That's what I
And
think.
it's
Yeah.
not it. Like I would always say, I still do, that it was my job to I didn't let anybody pierce the veil of children's home. Like I was there to deflect all risk. That was one of my jobs. So
Hmm.
if I had a veil around me, I was children's home. I was representing children's home. You could not penetrate me without me fighting. That was one of my jobs. That was external. Well, and could be internal, but that was externally. It's culture. So I had to sit here with 11 different sites and 54 different programs and all this. And what would happen is you would sit there and you'd work on breaking down these silos and then breaking down these silos. And then what happened? COVID hit and we were automatically all put back into the silos.
Yeah.
And it's people think that it's because it's remote, we're not in the office. There's a piece to that. There's a piece to the life's looser now and we don't need to work mentality. There's a small piece of that. But in my opinion, we were put back into silos. And
Oh,
those
interesting.
those silos, especially for small business, are tough to break down and get back to normal. Because with turnover as high as it is in the United States in certain sectors and certain companies, nursing as an example,
Oh, oh,
it's very hard for hospitals to keep a culture of happiness going in the nursing field. It's
right.
just hard. LCPC, you have therapists, you have people, police departments, ambulance, all of these different teachers. My wife's a teacher. Here's a great example. It is very hard when the system or systems are put into place to, with all of this turmoil going on externally in our world, to
Yeah.
be able to get up and go and teach our kids to become the next leaders. uh, it's hard. And you get down into, so let's say that you have 20 schools in a district. It's not uh, uncommon to have 20 silos.
Yeah.
And that's what's happened, in my opinion.
Wow. Wow. So it's up to the leaders in each one of those silos to reach across, to
You,
reach out.
you have to be the leader that you strive to be. I don't think anybody ever gets to a C-suite position by luck. Like, they may get to a certain position once, but to get to that point to be considered, you
Mhm.
have to do something good. Like, you have to be have a specialty, or you have to be well rounded, or you have to be very, very tight on the business, but you have to be a leader. And what's what's hard is, then as the CEO or whoever, you need to push down that piece of culture. And then where it gets lost a lot of times is that next layer.
Mhm.
So it's not the C-suite, it's that, let's say there's 100 managers under the C-suite. You've got 100 different leaders.
Mhm.
Not all of them are leaders, but you got 100 different people here, and you as the CEO are trying to push down an agenda of whatever you decide are the important things. So
Right.
for me, it was empathy. It was taking care of each other in the community. It was changing lives and saving lives. It was no bullying. It was uh, free and open speech. It is having a say, and we may not do it, but you at least have an opportunity to do something. So we did a program management project that gave everyone an opportunity to be able to present an idea. And here's what happens: you can have all of those great ideas, and it still is hard, and it may not work. But
Sure.
if you try, that's where I give CEOs or leaders credit. And I use CEOs just because that's where I was at. But I think that team around you is
Mhm.
really more important than the CEO.
Well, I think so too. And the CEOs that I deal with are generally in smaller, more entrepreneurial companies, not always, but in general, those are the kinds of people that join the Vistage organization.
Yes.
And my experience has been that the people that understand that the supervisor is the person that's going to determine whether or not someone quits, not them, and make sure that the training goes down. I hate the up and down thing. The
Yeah.
training goes out as far as the person, the supervisor, that everyone gets trained in certain things, uh, that they are talking about their values, that they
Right.
are redefining their values, because a lot of companies have values. They got values. It's up there on the website. How many times do I say to somebody, "Tell me what your values are," and they go, "Well, let me look at my wallet." you
Yeah.
know I think values are absolutely key, And the place that I'm at right now in my own growing edge is that I think a lot of organizations have to reevaluate their values. Not that the values are bad, but they have to give employees the opportunity to have input into what the values need to be moving forward. And that seems to be threatening. Because, like, well, no, I've got my values. This is how we have to be. Well, yeah, but you've got all these young people, these new people. Give them some input.
Right.
I'm developing a robot. I can't believe at my age I'm doing this. I'm developing I'm using artificial intelligence and working with someone that does this to create I do something called I call it the outside in values process. It is cumbersome as hell to go, but when you've got companies that are merging and you've got people that are bringing in new people out of other, it's bedlam. I've watched
Yeah.
so many people fail. So by going to the outside, meaning all the employees, and giving them the opportunity to have input by working on their own values first, because if you don't own it, you're not going to be able to bring it. And then give them some input as to how that translates into how the company has to operate to serve the customers. Because really, it's all about the customers, which is where my business has been from the very beginning, is customer loyalty. How do you get customers to be happy and love you?
Starbucks has one of the best strategies I've ever read. And I'll tell you why. When people think of Starbucks, they think about what? Selling coffee.
Yeah.
Then they have all the other products, food, cups, whatever. But really the goal is to sell coffee, right? That's not their number one initiative.
Yeah.
Their number one strategic initiative is their team. And they talk about, if our team is happy, our customers follow.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think about in general, now they've scaled tremendously over the past 25 years, but if you think about where they're at, typically they do a very good job of their employees being happy.
Typically.
And so typically, I'm not saying there's not they can't control, that's hard. But I would say in general, the system is put into place. And so like their strategy for me I was blown away, because typically when I read a strategy, I'm sitting here going, all right, what are the KPIs? What are you looking at from a initiative process? What are their goals? How does everything tie? It's people. And not all strategies are like that. And so I actually, when I read that was probably about 7, 8, 9 years ago. When I read that, I started asking a lot of CEOs in Fortune 500 or big companies. I would ask them, what is the most important item in your strategy? And 80% of them said safety. Safety of people
safety is important. Yeah.
Is number one. That. Now I knew it was even in our strategy. Safety was in it, but it wasn't number one. And over the past few years, what I've noticed is safety's becoming, and you could call it, there's a piece of it that's psychological safety. There's a piece of it that's safety. But that's actually probably one of the most important initiatives for a lot of these companies moving forward is safety, because you're not going to get people to work in an environment that they don't feel good in. Mm-hmm. And this is what you teach.
Well, the huge piece of it is psychological safety.
It's psychological safety.
And I think that there are people out there that still, there's an awful lot of people out there that still believe in that sort of tough love kind of thing.
Yeah.
The generations have changed.
Yeah.
I put up with all kinds of shit. I don't know about you, but I put up with all kinds of shit because that's what you did.
Right.
If you came home and, and said to your parents, said to your spouse, well, the boss did this or the boss did that. Well, he's the boss. And it usually was a he. Well, he's the boss. We're still ingrained. I think our mental models still have the military in it. There's the guy, then there's three other guys, and then there's six other guys. Now, we've swapped out and we now have women in those positions, which are beginning to change things. Absolutely beginning to change things. But I think our mental models are different. If we looked at business with a different mental model, if we drew a circle, and in that circle were your customers and your potential customers, and then we wrapped other circles around that circle. We wrap the HR circle, we wrap the production circle, if we began seeing it differently in our heads, it gets, I hate the word executed, it gets implemented differently. That's another thing that has to change is language. It gets implemented differently. Just as an aside to that, I spent years working for Citibank in New York. And I spent 2 weeks out of every month up there. And they'd done something that was not very nice. They'd closed a lot of branches and they forgot to let their customers know. So I was hired because they had hundreds and hundreds of very unhappy customers. So we were working with, I called in a change management person that knew how to do large scale change, because that level of change wasn't something that I had done before. And she was someone that I had met learning about the growing edge when I went to this very cutting edge program 35 years ago called The Art of Empowerment. so,
Yeah.
we're all coming, she was bringing me all kinds of wonderful new ideas. So anyway, we're doing this whole thing. And then one day I asked for a management meeting. I said, I need to get as many managers as I can here in the room with me, because I want to explain something to you. Now, whenever we did a workshop, and we invited the customers into our workshops, so the bankers got to actually hear from the customers what the customers wanted. I took notes. My partner was in a circle facilitating, and I took notes. And every night we go back to the hotel room and we'd write flip charts with all the words the customers had used.
Yeah.
And after a while, it was like a light bulb went up in my head. All of the words that the bankers used were military words. They had marketing blitzes. They when they were talking about interacting with the customer, they used the phrase up against the customer. I had never seen the language so blatantly negative towards the customer. Frequently, I would see there's a door. I worked for years in banks. There's a door that the teller has to walk through, and it would be the door that the teller had to walk through to get to the people. And there would be these, horrible drawings of someone shooting, just that kind of crap that you see in people's offices. And so I called this management meeting and I took PowerPoint slides and I actually started charting. Here's what you say and here's what they say. So I'm here to tell you that the only way forward is to take a look at this, and here's what your customers are telling me. They want you to make love, not war. And they all kind of went back in their seats like this. And several months later, I got a call on a Sunday night from one of the women I was working with, who said to me, if I were you, I'd start looking for more work. I'm like, what? What do you mean? We're in the middle of a project here. It's a 2-3 year project. She said, if I were you, I'd start looking for more work. What happened was several levels above.
Yeah.
Someone switched, looked at what we were doing, which had the title of customer care, and said, what is this care shit? I want a sales culture. Everything we had done, all the money they'd spent, all the work we had done. And it broke my heart, because I got very close to 164 people who in their branches were trying to do something to comfort these angry customers, something to make them laugh, something to make the long lines go faster. We had the most creative thing I've ever done in my life, the kinds of things that we came up with because we engaged the managers. But it literally was heartbreaking.
Yeah, that's tough. And I mean, I can be part of that story. Like that way you just told that story, I can see that unraveling right as you were, and I actually could have written the ending.
Really?
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me. I call that old school management. I mean,
Oh, that's what it is.
yeah,
Yes.
I mean that really doesn't fly. You know that. And I think what's interesting is the companies that are understanding where, like, I have 5 kids and I have 4 daughters. So I'm always, growing up, I was always girl power. You be a leader, you do this, you do, and don't ever, let them say you can't do something, right?
That's
But
it.
but what's interesting is as they've grown into adults, they have become leaders in their own right, but it's a different playing field. Like it's not when I was younger, like things have changed, so to speak. I think there's different opportunities. Now, I have having 4 daughters, I'm like there's a ton of women that are more deserving than men and job. Like I totally get that. I agree with it. Um, and you want to push your kids and push these kids. So when I go like speak to schools, I'm like, be great at all things. You don't have to sit here and say that I'm going to be a nurse and I'm only going to do nurse things. Like that's old school.
Right.
I'm going to be a nurse and I'm actually going to be on a community board and I'm going to do this and I'm going to and what you're describing, what you had like back during the time of the bank, 164 people. That's something I always talk about is you have passion and compassion.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
those are two important. You have to have empathy. You have to understand what that means. You have to have passion for the job, which obviously you did. But you also have to have compassion to the people working next to you. And I
Yeah.
don't think back in the day everybody had compassion. I think work needs to get back to the compassion piece so you can meet people where they're at. And the example I give is I had a person that was, I had a complaint one time about an employee, and somehow it got to me. I don't know how it did or why, it's irrelevant, but um, and they were just complaining this person this, and they're not engaged and this and that. Well, they didn't realize that the person just lost their mom. She also didn't realize that the person has just found out she has breast cancer
Oh my God.
and was going through a divorce. So if you, it's your right to tell whoever you want whatever you want, right? But if you don't know that, that's the piece that hurts. So
Hmm.
I called the person who made the complaint in the office, and I was pissed. Like, and I said to him, I said, you have zero compassion, right? You don't know what's wrong. Like you can't judge somebody. Now, there's lazy people,
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah.
but you can't sit here and indict someone without knowing a story. And we in this day and age are we do it too fast. This person sucks. This person doesn't do this. This person's young. Millennials can't work. Millennials don't want to work. My daughters are 10 times smarter than me. They want to work. So, don't tell me. I hate it when people say millennials don't want to work. Well, I know a lot of people that are my age that don't want to work either.
That's
It,
right.
it, it it's not just millennials. So it's all these stereotypes in business and everything. And so it goes back to what we first started talking about, it's leadership.
Hmm.
The leader has to understand to build a team around her or him, whoever, and build this team. And that is the most important part of your job is to have that team have all of those qualities. Now you can call them the vision or morals or whatever, have all those qualities. For me, you needed to be compassionate. You needed to be passionate. You needed to change lives and save lives. You needed to want to accept to be hooked. You need to love what you do. all of those different things. Then we can talk 401k and all those things. Like, we'll talk about that. That's important. But if you don't have these qualities, it's very hard to be in any position.
Right, right, right. I also think, and this is something that I came to in reality when I was running a team, long before I ever knew what I was doing. You know, sometimes you just do things instinctively.
Yeah.
Because I had a very high performing team. I wasn't exactly sure what I was doing. I just did what felt right. Maybe you could call me an intuitive leader, and I failed a lot. I mean, I wasn't perfect. But as I began to study, I began to realize that when a leader has a strengths focus, when a leader is always saying, what is this person's strength? How can we manage them from their strengths? How can we talk about strengths? I'm not sure that all leaders know how to have the strengths conversation. So when I talk about, because I use the science. So when I talk about creating a 3-to-1 positivity to negativity ratio, and then talk about high performance is creating a 5-to-1 positivity to negativity ratio, they go through the roof because they think what I'm saying they think what I'm saying is you have to go over and pat these people on the head and tell them they're doing a good job 5 times a day. That is not it at all. It means being intuitive enough, having the right tools, and there are beautiful tools out there today, knowing your people so well so you know what their strengths are, and then you help them use their strengths to overcome the parts of themselves that are not as strong. We still have that, we still have the language barrier of saying weaknesses or uh, a big one, why can't I give them constructive criticism? Well, because it's still criticism. If the language changes to accommodate a different word, which is how do I give them constructive feedback? Well, it's easy to give constructive feedback. If you've been giving positive feedback all along the way, when you see somebody doing something right and you let them know that you noticed it and you let them know how it fit into the mission and you let them know that how much you appreciate it when it comes time, because you're building a big emotional bank account with someone. That's how I literally use a little chart with check marks. You're making a big emotional bank account with that employee. When it comes time to have a conversation with that employee, perhaps their performance fell short or whatever, but the better you know your employees, the better the whole department, unit, company will run. I just don't know how much of that is being taught out there. Is it being taught at Harvard Business School? I know Harvard is teaching happiness because Tal Ben-Shahar comes out
Yeah.
of Harvard and Sean Aker comes out of Harvard. And they're all, those are people I love. I've never met Sean, but I know Marty and I know Tal. And that's what they were teaching from the very, very, very beginning.
Harvard Business School exec ed is where I'm in. My title is executive leadership coach at Harvard Business School.
Right.
And it is probably one of the coolest things I've ever experienced in my life.
Oh, I'm just even excited to know you.
Like the people, the faculty, um, there's professors that are just so cool. The other coaches are brilliant. Um, and you're just around fun, right? Like, and it's serious business because these people come from all over the world. And
Yep.
so these people come, like in my last group that I had, I didn't have anybody from the United States. I was given, I'm given 8 people each time. And um, I have learned so much in a few-year period, way more than I ever have in my life. And they do teach that, like they what they not only know the case study models and the uh, they're but they break it down like you've never seen before, and here's what they do that I find awesome.
Cool.
They can have you look at something from both sides to where you're even confused.
Huh.
So, give you an example. Here's a case study. Here's an actual problem from a business that happened 10 years ago at this Fortune 500 company, global. Here's the scenario. Here's how the CEO and management reacted. Here was the outcome. What would you have done differently? And then we break and they break down and they'll sit here and you'll have now you think about this people from all over the world. This isn't just sitting here in Illinois or some state and you're sitting here with 8 Illinois businesses and you're talking about business. This is uh, Spain and Morocco and China and all these cool places. And they all have different cultures and they all have cool cultures and they all run their businesses differently. And they all put their heads together and they all sit here and come up with this. And then what happens is you add the negotiation piece into it because you have to come to a resolution. You have to, what would you do? Then you have to break it down. And so there's it's one of the coolest things. I know we're probably short on time. Do I have time for one quick story?
Oh, you have as much time as you want. You remember, we're pretending that we're sitting in a
All right.
somewhere having a drink together and talking. That's what I like. That's why I like this format
All
because
right.
it's giving us what we need. I want to hear your stories.
I want to give you an example of something that a leader does. You do it for the right reason, but then the outcome comes back to you 100-fold, and but that was never the reason why you did it. Now let me explain. All
Negative
right.
is it a negative outcome or a positive outcome?
Positive.
Good. Okay,
Okay.
great.
So one day this is a true story. So one day I'm at my office and it's about 9 a.m. and I get a call from it was cold out. It was about 30 degrees here in Illinois. I get a call from one of the team members and they said, so and so, a young female, 14, she ran. She left, no shoes on, no coat. Okay. Now she's in the wind. I said, I need a status update every hour. I want to know what's going on. There's certain crises that I wouldn't handle, my team would handle, but something this big, I would say it starts out at a level 7, 8, 9. It could be a 10. So I'm worried. Okay. So it gets to be noon, no word. It gets to be 2, no word. Gets to be 4, no word. Now, the police, the state police, the sheriff, everybody's involved.
Sure.
No word. Now, my team was so good that they were like investigators. They know every spot in town where people hide. They know, everything. Nothing's coming up. I
Uh-huh.
had my team everywhere. So, being a dad, I took I went home that night and I couldn't eat. And I sat there and I told my wife the story, and which I never tell. And I said, I'm just gonna need to be alone. I'm quiet now. I'm thinking. I'm not mad. I just need to be alone. So 9 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock at night, nothing. Called the sheriff's office, nothing. So what happened was I ended up going to bed. I couldn't sleep. And it got to be in our business, we didn't wear suits and ties. Now, we also didn't wear ties for a reason because a kid could grab it and do something. So I went to bed laying there, and then all of a sudden I got up and it's 1 in the morning, and my wife says, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm showering and I'm putting on my suit and tie." I said, this is the time I need to be a CEO. So I put on my gear. I dressed up nice, felt like a boss. I called the sheriff's department and I said, I'm going to be, here's my car, here's my license plate. Do not pull me over. I'm looking for this girl. I got in my car and I drove around for 5 hours. Nothing. I was in everywhere. And I felt like it was my duty to do it, not only as a CEO, but as a dad. But it was also my duty to show my team what I was doing. Now, I didn't think of that at the time, but I'm going to come back to that at the end.
Okay.
So I'm in this area and it's starting to get light out. Now, I have had zero success, and so has my team. I decide to go down a road home that I have never gone down before. I drive down the road and I look over, and up on a viaduct, I see 2 feet barely hanging out. And I said, oh my God, that might be her. So now, her past, let's just say that men were an issue in her past. Now she's only 14. So I was like, I'm here alone. If she's at the top, she's by these train tracks.
Yeah.
If I get out, she jumps up. I still wasn't sure it was her, but if she jumps up, she could run on the train. She's gone again. There's no way I can get her. So I kind of did the old Dukes of Hazzard where I drove up and I spun around and I drive by again. And sure enough, I see her. Now, I drive back. I get my supervisor on. I get a supervisor on the phone, and a female supervisor, and I tell her the situation. So I go get her. Now, I go get her. She's right up the street, like 2 minutes. She gets in my car, and I drive back, and the girl's still there. I drop off the employee. I go down the street and come back, and I'm hidden.
All right.
She gets her down, and she was blue in the lips. She was freezing cold.
Oh,
I would say that a few more hours she would have been dead.
sure.
I She gets in the car. They take her to the police station or to the sheriff's station. They got her dressed, got her back into the safety of our place. And I got back in my car and I drove to my office and I sat in my desk with my suit and tie. And all of a sudden, an hour later, people are coming by my office. And they had to have driven to my office because we had different locations. And these are the people who I call the heroes, the front line. And they come by and they said, thank you, Mr. George. That's what a CEO does. Thank you,
Wow.
Mr. George. Now,
Wow.
now, I didn't obviously do it for that, but
No.
when I have 15 stories very similar. So when people ask, I can't describe how to be a leader all the time, but when people want to know what made a good leader, maybe great leader, it was someone that could jump in and do what anybody else does. Because at that time, you're a human, you're not a director or CEO. You're a dad, you're a human, and that is the piece that should translate to for profit or nonprofit.
Mhm.
That is the most important piece of life, is taking care of people. And then what everyone saw, it word spread like wildfire. And
Right.
what that does is it elevates the key word here, trust.
Uh-huh.
It elevates trust. And when the trust is there, you're building up this rapport, so that story becomes something that the group doesn't forget, right?
Wow.
But then you do it again. But not just me. Every day our team did it. Every day. So when you sit here and you look at people and you go, that person's in maintenance. Well, guess what? They were my most important employee at many times. I always say the cook is more important than me. Why? Because kids love food more than they love anything. So my point is, it doesn't matter position. It doesn't matter education. What matters is passion, compassion, empathy, caring for people, changing lives and saving lives, and taking care of the person next to you. And if you don't agree with that, I don't have time for you. That's how I manage.
Wow. If only leaders could have that much clarity.
Right.
You did not mention the bottom line. You did not mention shareholder value. You did
Right.
not mention so many of the things that leaders talk about. So that's pretty wonderful. And I want to just make one observation from the perspective of someone who teaches, I'm going to say, a more esoteric leadership style, a lot more like yours. You got quiet enough to listen to your intuition and you trusted it.
Right. And I wanted to feel, see, power is an interesting word. Power is useless unless it's used right.
Exactly.
I had the power to get my suit on, to get in my car, to not get pulled over. I drive a black car, to not get pulled over,
Okay.
to not, it's suspicious looking
Of
for
course. Of
five
course.
hours driving around an area, right? And I was not going to stop until I found her. And that's what we do. We change lives and save lives.
Yeah. That's amazing. You have been so wonderful to talk to. And
It's been an honor to be here.
it's just such a confirmation for me because I'm used to people going, "Oh, happiness in business," like that. And I think the problem is the word. I think the problem is we all have our own association with the word happiness. And it's much bigger than that. It's positive leadership. It's positive leadership that's going to get us where we need to go. It's unfortunate that unless you have the time to unpack what that means, people don't get it, and
That's right.
they think it's Pollyanna-ish, and it's not at all. So it's just been such a pleasure.
I
I hope
love
we
it.
I hope we have the opportunity to meet
Yeah.
again, uh, and maybe even through that David connection, which would be really cool. So thank you so much for contributing to the Growing Edge, and stay there. One of my old spiritual teachers, he's gone now. His name was Stuart Wilde. He used to say, if you're he used to say, if you're not living on the edge, you're taking up too much room.
I love that.
Isn't that great? And
Yeah.
I keep getting that vision because when you're on the edge, you're always trying to find the balance between what was and what will be.
Yeah.
And and you just exemplify that. And
Well, I
thank you
appreciate
from
it.
the bottom of
Thank
my
you.
heart for all the work that you do in the nonprofit sector because it's surely needed right now.
I
So
appreciate it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Keep them happy, hon. Keep them happy.
JoAnna, you rock. And don't
Thank
stop
you.
talking about happiness. All
I
right.
won't stop talking about it. Thank
All
you
right.
so much.
We'll see you later. Thank you.